321. It's another episode of the Brett Allen Show, and today we are chatting with the iconic voice actor, Bill Ratner. You know him. Well, growing up, if you watched G.I. Joe in the 80s, you would definitely know him as the voice of Flint, but also he has many, many other credits to his name: Mass Effect, Grand Theft Auto, Final Fantasy. He's showing us his shirt there. Just so many different things. Thank you for your time today, Bill. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
You bet, Brad. Good to be on your show.
Well, this is very exciting because we have a lot to talk about. Now, I understand, I don't know how far along you are with this, but you do a lot of things. You do poetry, you do voice acting, but also you have an upcoming memoir which will delve into the many facets of your life and career. I know the release date is to be announced, but what can you tell us about it, and what can the fans expect? Because I'm sure a lot of your fans would really are just excited about what's coming down the pike.
Well, it's funny, Brett. I actually got approached by an outfit called freezeraypoetry.com. That's freezeraypoetry.com. That was putting out an anthology of poems and flash fiction dealing with the Marvel universe.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, well, what does that have to do with G.I. Joe? Because they contacted me, because of my connection with G.I. Joe as Flint. And I was reminded that the G.I. Joe comic books were commissioned by Hasbro to be done by Marvel. And this was in advance of Transformers and G.I. Joe coming out in syndication on TV. And at the time, the FCC did not allow television commercials for action figures that were in the actual show in which the spot would be aired. So in other words, on Barbie's Saturday afternoon show, you couldn't advertise a Barbie doll in a commercial. Or you couldn't advertise Flint or Lady J or Cobra Commander in G.I. Joe. President Reagan at the time, who was pro-business and didn't care so much about regulations, said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. We got to change this." But the way around it for Hasbro was to go to Marvel and say, "Listen, you've got to make some comic books that look exactly like our animation for the new series, G.I. Joe, All-American Hero." And so Marvel came out with this really gorgeous array, illustrated by the great, legendary, still living Larry Hama. Beautiful comic books that are collector's editions that all Joe fans probably own some of. And so that was the connection. And I wrote a piece, kind of a silly poem flash fiction piece about standing in line and auditioning for G.I. Joe back in 1983. At the Wally Burr Studios in Studio City, California. And it was really fun to write about it. It brought back memories, and I really never thought of myself as a writer. I thought of myself as a voice actor. And so I started writing. I started writing short pieces for The Moth and The Moth Radio Hour and shows like that, and went on stage live for a number of years doing these short pieces. And a lot of them are personal. People get up on stage and do personal stories that are sometimes sad, sometimes funny, sometimes about comic books. And that's how I got into it. And my childhood was a little unusual, and I was a very lucky middle-class kid. My dad was in advertising and was on TV a lot, talking about advertising and marketing and so on in local television shows in Minneapolis. But died when I was 13, in the same year that my brother died, and my mother had died when I was young. And so people said, "Hey, you're a writer, you got a story to tell." And so and I started getting pieces published about that, as well as about the Marvel Universe. So that's what's coming up, called Announcing the Apocalypse by Bill Ratner. In the meantime, at every fine bookstore, it's The Fear of Fish. Brent,
Yes.
This is me when I was 6 years old, sucking my thumb, which I was very good at age 6. These days, I'm more into Cuban cigars, and
I like that.
These are actual. I think the GI Joe poem is in one of these, but it got a cut. These are both from Southern publishers. One Finishing Line Press in Georgetown, Kentucky, and the other Alien Buddha Press in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The poetry and flash fiction press world is interesting. These small family-owned publishing companies that usually say no, sometimes say yes. And anyway, that's a long-winded answer to your question, Brent.
That's okay. Now, those two books I find very fascinating. If I or our listeners wanted to get a copy outside of, like, say, a Comic-Con where we might meet you, where can we get one, or where could I get one?
You can actually go on the publisher's sites, or easier, of course, is Mr. Bezos's Mamazon. To order, you can either put in my name, Bill Ratner, Amazon.com, or Fear of Fish and Bill Ratner, and it'll come up, and you can order it through Amazon, or you can order it through B. Dalton, and same with To Decorate a Casket, which is funny poems and serious poems, and but we're not talking about rhyming poems and old-fashioned stuff that you hated when you were in sixth grade. Poetry today has actually gotten kind of fun and challenging and interesting, and the memoir, of course, is going to be, and is, portions of it have been published already as prose. But that's Google and Amazon Bill Ratner near you.
I love it. Yeah, I remember being in grade school, and Shel Silverstein was kind of like the hot thing at the time.
Yeah, right.
In fact, you had to be at a certain reading level to even read those books. So I thank you to my third and fourth grade teachers for inspiring my interest to read. This is very interesting. I want to circle back a little bit because you said something interesting that got my attention, and I just want to make sure I heard you and clarified. So G.I. Joe at one point was owned by Marvel, or
No,
Marvel?
no,
Okay.
It was always a Hasbro franchise, and it was very, very successful with the 11.5-inch character G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe originally was a World War II figure.
Yes.
Drawn by comic book artists and by editorial artists in the newspapers during and after World War II. And Hasbro came up with the action figure, the answer to Mattel's Barbie, since Barbie was making Mattel a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah, that's
and Hasbro did toys and so on. And they came up with G.I. Joe. And he did well until the Vietnam War in the 70s had worn on for way too many years. And Americans who were buying toys for their kids got tired of buying G.I. Joe. And George Lucas came out with Star Wars right around 76, 77.
Right.
And not 11.5-inch action figures, but 3-inch action figures, 3.5 inches, made in China, cheap, where the arms moved and the head turned, and that was about it. And so Hasbro said, we're losing money. Our stock is in the toilet. It's the 80s now. George Lucas is a billionaire. What do we do? And somebody in the merchandising department says, let's do what Lucas did. Shrink him down. Don't sell the big G.I. Joe. And clone him. Make the Joe team. Well, how do we sell the Joe team? Nobody cares about G.I. Joe anymore. And so they created the 6-episode miniseries with Flint and Lady J and Duke and Scarlet and Cobra Commander and Destro, etc. Wow. And they said, well, we have to let the public know in a way that's reasonably priced. We're not going to be running Class A commercials on CBS and NBC. So Hasbro executives went to Marvel and said, you guys make comic books. Would you be willing to make a limited series of G.I. Joe comic books? Wow. Joe team comic books. And again, this is the early 80s. And Marvel said, yeah, we can make some money off it. And why don't you subsidize it? And maybe you can pay for a run of them, Mr. and Mrs. Hasbro. And so that's what was done. And again, the great comic book illustrator, Larry Hama, illustrated those initial G.I. Joe comic books. There were G.I. Joe comic books in the early 70s, 60s, and I think even back in the 50s, when American troops were fighting in Korea. And at the time, that G.I. Joe was this angry-looking guy with a 6-day growth of beard and a big square jaw, like Dick Tracy, who I love to shoot out his gun. And but this is the Joe team, which included women and included figures from all over the world and different ethnicities, etc. And so with the lead of the Marvel comic books. And then television commercials advertising not G.I. Joe the show, but G.I. Joe the comic book, which looked exactly like the show.
Wow.
So it was a brilliant marketing ploy on the part of Hasbro with the aid of Marvel's comic books. Same illustrations. Oh, Daddy, that comic book looks just like the television show for the new G.I. Joe. I don't know how Transformers handled it. I wasn't as involved. I played just in one episode of Transformers as Flint's father.
Yeah, I remember that when they did the crossover.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, this is all fascinating. And now we know, and knowing is half the battle, right?
Yes, now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
Interesting. So this world of G.I. Joe, I mean, you've done many projects, past and current. I know Robot Chicken has used you dozens of times, which I think is just cool. I have talked with the Robot Chicken team on other projects they've done. Crossing Swords, I don't know if you saw it on Hulu, the little black figure people. It's basically an adult version of.
Was that a Seth Green production?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, John Harvardine and all those guys. But anyway, we talked a little bit about that, just kind of the worlds crossing and stuff. But G.I. Joe this whole thing has stood the test of time. There's been live action films, all of that. But I'm curious, I know as a voice actor you audition and there are all these different things, but how did this role come about for you voicing Flint, and sort of where were you at in the trajectory of your career when this came out? And it's kind of a two-pronged question, but was this really like kind of the biggest thing you had done at the time, or you had done many other things and this was just sort of something that was pretty front facing?
Well, Brett, apropos of what we were just talking about, which was, the brilliant and very complex and very expensive launch of G.I. Joe, All-American Hero, the TV show, and really pretty much at the same time as Transformers as well, so parallel universes in terms of marketing. They'd kept it very secret. So none of us as voice actors or any of the agents knew what was going on at Hasbro.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, the agents get a call for every old television character actor from the 50s and 60s, come and audition for voices on G.I. Joe and Transformers. Every voice actor in town. I showed up in Studio City near Universal at a little recording studio named Wally Burr Recording on Ventura Boulevard. And there were over 100 people lined up on a nice, warm Southern California day with single sheets of black and white Xeroxes of roughly drawn characters from this brand new Joe team. And we're sort of looking at each other going, with Joe team, I remember G.I. Joe. I was a little too old to own one, but my nephew had one. But what's the Joe team? And in front of me was Mary McDonnell Lewis going, "Yo, Joe, yo, Joe." I said, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm Lady J. I'm supposed to scream, yo, Joe." And so we looked at our lines, and I happened to be given the page for Flint. They may have listened. They may the showrunners and the writers of the show, G.I. Joe, may have listened to voice demos and picked certain individuals, but they auditioned literally hundreds of us, which is very unusual. You've heard of that, which we looked for this child for 2 years and finally found.
I know, it's like we spent 5 years
Right, right,
looking to
right.
cast the lead of this independent film. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And for this, they spent one day, but it was a long day.
Yeah.
And so when my turn was called, I climbed up the wooden stairs and into the little dark, moody lit voiceover booth. And on the other side of the glass was a dozen people, executives, marketing executives from Hasbro, and Wally Burr, the director, who owned the studio and had been hired by Hasbro to do these auditions. Sunbow Productions, which did the actual physical production of the show. And so Wally goes, "All right, give me a level." "All right, Lady J, you better get your battle gear on." "All right, good. Make it a little louder." You can see from the picture, he's got big pectorals. He's got a black beret, special forces. Name's Flint. "All right, take one, go." "All right, Lady J, you better get your battle gear on because Cobra's on their way and I can't bring up the laser threat weapon system. Yo, Joe!" And yeah, it's good, says Wally Burr in front of all the Hasbro executives. But make it angrier, make it louder. All right, take two. And that was it. And so okay, thank you, and walked out of there. Next. And this went on, probably 150 times that day with actors young and old. And literally, I recognized guys I had seen in the 50s on The Virginian, Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, wow. Because they were looking for young and old, male and female, white, black, Asian, Native American. They were looking for every kind of actor in Hollywood to play characters in G.I. Joe, hoping that the 6-episode miniseries would sell and then they could produce a series. So it was really dependent on the excellence of the animation and so on. And at that point, to answer your question in my career, I'd I was in radio at the time doing a morning show, KBIG, KBIG, literally, FM 104.3 in LA. And with a newsman, and he and I would do funny stuff and play, Lionel Richie. That was Lionel Richie doing a Rolling Stones song. And auditioning for and doing, radio commercials for banks and that kind of stuff. And I had done, a few cartoons. I'd been in Hanna-Barbera doing character stuff. But I had no idea what this G.I. Joe thing was, except there were a bunch of people auditioning. And I thought, oh, great. Well, snowball's chance in hell. And weeks went by. I completely forgot about it because I had no idea as to the scope of this thing. And maybe 2-3 weeks later, I get a call from my agent. "Remember that G.I. Joe thing? Well, you got it." "Got what?" "Flint. You're Flint." Oh, the character. Yeah. And you're booked next Thursday at Wally Burr Studios, same place. Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I show up, and there is Mary McDonnell Lewis, Lady J, and there is Michael Bell as Duke, and on and on. And I think there were about 8 of us at 8 microphones lined up in this voiceover studio. Everybody has seen either photographs or videos of voiceover studios, or same thing as a rock and roll studio. They're exactly the same studios, only they take the drums out and put the voice actors in. And a young woman comes out, passes out the scripts. And so we have no idea, are we doing one episode? Is this a special? And she said, "I'm supposed to tell you that no one dies in G.I. Joe." and we look at each other. She's the classic Hollywood script girl, they called her, the young woman who's maybe a college student or maybe, just graduated.
Intern or something, that's just
intern, right. And we looked at each other. What do you mean nobody dies in G.I. Joe? Half the cast is going to die. No, because parent groups, apparently like the National PTA and church groups.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Wind of Hasbro's and Sunbow's plans and said, "We are not going to let our children watch a war cartoon. We're sick of the Vietnam War, blah, 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 blah." And so you'll remember, Joe fans will remember that no one really does die. when cobras shot down out of the sky,
No.
he parachutes over the horizon just gently to his end. And then she says, true story. I'm also supposed to tell you that if you're interested, you should buy Hasbro stock, but don't wait. And again, we look at each other and go, oh, what is this? Are we cast as voice actors, or are they just trying to, is this a pyramid scheme? We should have listened. That day, I think in middle to late 1983, Hasbro stock was worth X dollars a share. I don't remember the exact figure. Had I spent $100 that week or that month on Hasbro stock and waited for 2 years for 2 seasons of G.I. Joe and Transformers, my $100 would have been worth about $1,100. Silly me. So that was kind of their version of almost insider trading. And
Yeah.
I'll do a favor. The cast is not going to make a dime off any of the action figures. They're just going to make their, $800 for a session for an episode. So give them a hint. Tell them to buy some stock. We think it's going to be successful and go up. Darn.
Unbelievable. I mean, well, even 800 for a session then was really good. I'm
Yeah.
very curious. I have a couple more questions here. So time has marched on. You, as I mentioned, this world of G.I. Joe has continued on and on. You've done other projects. Of course, we mentioned. I'm interested to get your perspective briefly here as far as we talk in the 80s, you're going down to a studio and you're recording. Now in this generation, not even talking about COVID or whatever, just period, do you do most of your work from a home studio now, or do you still travel to audition? How does that work for you, Bill?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Let's see. I'm gonna Google here. Seth MacFarlane, Family Guy. So I'm trying to remember. I think yeah, I've had my studio for maybe 30 years. But a studio these days can consist of an iPad and a decent microphone.
Yeah.
Decent meaning you got to spend $400 or $500. You can't use a snowball mic. And a closet, as long as there are enough clothes in there to absorb the sound. It used to be the studios we went to in the 80s and 90s, a post-production facility that did sound for everything from NBC to MSNBC to the movies. Charged anywhere from $750 to $1,250 an hour for. They had, millions of dollars worth of equipment. I think I was doing the Hyundai campaign a few years ago. Jeff Bridges was doing the nationals. I was doing the local tags. And visit Louisville Hyundai for your special deal. Put my daughters through college. But I was studying in college just purely for the heck of it. I was taking an MFA in creative writing, a low residency, University of California, Palm Desert. And
Wow.
10 days every 6 months, I had to go to the desert, stay in a glorified motel and go to class. But I didn't want to give up the gig, so I brought my stuff out there. And I thought, what am I going to do? This horrible motel room is echoey. I took all 6 bed pillows, put them on the desk against the wall, grabbed a huge cushion from the couch, put it in the corner, and aimed myself towards the cushion and the pillows. And then they dialed me up on my laptop. And the mixer from the recording studio in Orange County, California, for Hyundai was a pro. He'd worked with me for a couple of years and said, hey, raise the level just a little bit. Don't give me any EQ. I'll do it here. So he knew what he was doing. He had a good pair of ears. And he said to me, as I'm sitting nervously this first day of my stay in this glorified motel room, are you in a different studio? He asks. Yeah, I'm in a different studio. I didn't say, I'm really sorry, I'm in a crappy motel room. And he goes, oh, good. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. And I went, oh, phew. And then he said, it's funny, it actually sounds better than your normal studio. And I
Wow.
went, wait a minute, I've invested thousands, not tens of thousands, but thousands of dollars, an $800 phone patch amp and a beautiful $1,200 microphone preamp and a $4,000 ISDN box and on and on and on. And, the booth itself cost a couple grand. Certainly not millions. I thought all that, all the effort, all the sweat equity, and I sound better in a cheap motel room. It's it's the pillows and the couch cushion. So
Wow.
this is again a long-winded answer to your question about.
No, I love it. I mean, I have this microphone here, the Selectra Voice, which is broadcast quality mic, and I
Yeah,
mean, you can just do anything from home these days. Well, this is just absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate your time. I think if anybody's watching and listening, and you're a kid of the '80s and you love GI Joe, this is for you. This is a love letter to you. If you have never seen it and you're in a lower demographic, literally you can go onto YouTube, Google any of these places, and check out all the amazing work that Bill has been a part of. And yeah, I mean, it would be great to see the GI Joe cartoons kind of make their way back again and kind of
they're on Hulu. Actually, there's still you can download GI Joe and Transformers cartoons, the whole both seasons of GI Joe, 52 episodes, and Transformers from Hulu.
There you have it. Well, Bill Ratner, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It's been quite the pleasure chatting with you.
Great, Brett. The Brett Allen Show, ladies and gentlemen, on a streaming device near you.